Good evening and welcome to Dog Talk. I'm Dan Camilleri.
And I'm Laura McKillop. We'd like to start by thanking Enduro for their ongoing support in bringing you our live weekly Q&A. Sorry, tonight we're fortunate enough to be speaking with Bill Scott from Stockman's Kelpies and Collars.
Bill will be picking who he thinks has asked the best question of the night, and they will win a bag of Enduro high energy food for working dogs with Real Kangaroo Meat.
Evening, Bill. How you going?
Good, thanks, Laura. Yes.
Soy.
Hi, Dan.
G'day, Bill. How was your day, mate?
Yeah, pretty good. We've got to put up with a bit of Victorian Western District weather up here, which is a bit unusual, but we'll get through
it. Fairly wet, I believe.
Yeah, it is wet, yeah.
Can't catch a break at the moment?
No, I don't know what's happened to the El Nino they said we're having, but...
No. So, been rocking out the gumboots for a little while now?
Yes, yeah. Yeah, we've had close on 6 inches here this month.
Yeah, crazy. Wow. So it'd be fairly green, I'm assuming?
It's green, yeah.
Yeah, but probably pretty short.
Yeah, it would grow quicker if we got a bit of sunshine.
Fantastic. Mate, we might dive into it then. Bill, do you want to just tell us a little bit about yourself, mate? Where you're from, where you grew up?
Okay, I grew up in South Gippsland. I could hear the surf of the Southern Ocean at night, most nights from home. On a dairy farm. My father was a dairy farmer and I followed in his footsteps dairying. Yeah, moved from Gippsland to Northern Victoria, still milking cows in 1988. And
yeah, wow.
Stopped milking 96, 97 we stopped milking and bought a grazing place. And a few years ago we scaled down. We only got a toy farm these days, only got a bit over 100 acres.
And was that in the family for generations, or how'd that come about?
I guess so. My grandfather was a butter factory manager throughout Gippsland, several different places.
Yeah.
But he bought a dairy farm when my father and uncle were teenagers, and I think 1928. So yeah, we've been dairy farmers since 1928, but involved in the dairy industry before that.
Yeah, wow.
And you've been on your 100 acres there for a fair few years now?
12, I think, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
You're right, Laura.
What took you to that area, Bill?
Well, we didn't move far from the grazing property we had. It was at Glenrowan West, and we're now at Greta West, but as the crow flies, we're only 6 or 7 kilometres from the 2,000 acre place we had.
Yeah. Yeah. And were dogs always in your life through that, or what was the go there?
Yeah, there's photos of me with working dogs when I was a toddler. And I guess I started working dogs to get dairy cows in when I was 6 or 7 years old. So yeah, getting close to 70 years I've been working dogs.
How did those dogs look back then, mate? What kind of dogs are we talking about?
My father wasn't really a dog person, so they were mostly just crossbred dogs. I know he did have a very good blue heeler at one stage that he could cast big distance. Whether it was pure or not, I don't know. It looked pure enough, but and and I started with some. Well, probably the first pup I had would have been 80 or 90% border collie. Probably had a bit of healer blood in it. But yeah, I got a pup from a neighbour when I was 10 or 11 and started that.
And the gentleman by the name of Vic Holland introduced you into collies. Is that correct?
Well, I actually bought a collie bitch, and because I was always interested in stud breeding, I had my own Jersey stud when I was 9, and so breeding purebred animals has always been part of who we are. And I bought a bitch called Karawatha Coco, and then very soon after met Vic, and he helped me a lot with educating her, and introduced me to 3 sheep trials. And I think the first 3 trials I went to, she crossed on a cast.
Yeah.
And the next, then the next trial I went to, I saw some of the top dogs and handlers in the open cross on their cast, and I thought, oh, if old Bill Marshall can cross on his cast, it can't be too bad after all. It must have given me a bit of confidence to go out, and she actually won the novice that day, so that set me off. Yeah.
And you mentioned there that like in the purebred stuff, what was it about your purebred lines, whether it be your Jersey cows or the collies? Then, what was it that I suppose kept you going there?
Yeah, good question. I hadn't really thought about that one. I guess it was a bid to improve what I had, and without knowing what's in the past, you're breeding blind. So if you've got something that's purebred, you've got a pedigree to work from, and I think that is probably the best reason to stick with purebreds of whatever, is getting consistency in what you're breeding. Yep. By knowing what's in the background.
And was there any sort of lines that sort of started you out, like that those collies had in them?
Yeah, there was I used a lot of Alroy blood. I bought a dog. I paid a very high price at the time of $300 for a 12-month-old dog who'd already run a 94 or something in a trial. And, the old fellas were trying to help me, and they'd say, if the obstacle's there and the sheep are there, you'd need your dog there. Well, I didn't have a dog that was capable of getting there. And I bought Alroy Rob, and obstacle's there, sheep are there. Oh, shit, he's there already. And that dog taught me a huge amount, and he was a really outstanding dog. I was lucky to have him. And I also used quite a bit of Yulong, which is Bob Ross's blood. They were probably the 2 main lines, which they're still around today. Tully Williams still breeding with those old bloodlines, and a few other people. Craig Lee in Queensland's got some dogs. I think Swan Spud has quite a bit of Alroy blood.
Yeah.
When you started toying with these particular lines, how different were they from what you were already involved with, and how did they help you evolve as a handler?
Natural workers. You didn't have to. There's one of the big criticisms of collies is that you have to tell them each step to take because they can't work it out for themselves. Well, those dogs were very natural, and you didn't have to talk to them. They knew the distance they should be off stock. They worked on the edge of the flight zone and used enough power to do the job, and no more, but always enough to shift whatever it was.
Yeah. And you obviously had a bit of success with your collies and your 3-sheep trialing. What moved you across to Kelpies?
We were battling share farmers back then, and we couldn't sell border collie pups. There was just no demand, and everyone wanted Kelpies. That was one of the reasons. The other one was my wife Margaret's grandfather was very keen on Kelpies, and he did actually work quite a lot of crossbred dogs, but he had a line of pure Kelpies, and he'd occasionally take a bitch out to a collie dog to breed his workers, but he kept his Kelpie line pure, and he was at me in his final years to work some Kelpies, and so we moved across. The first couple of Kelpies I got, I tried to treat like collies, and they didn't like it much, so we parted ways. I got a pup from Frank Scanlon, a dog called Scanlon's Fred. He turned out to be one of the best sires in Gippsland, well, probably in Victoria, because John Geddes bought him from me, I think it was 1983, and
Great year.
I got $2.5 grand plus the right to put bitches to him after the sale, which would be, $2.5 grand 1983 is probably 30 grand today.
Yeah.
That was a big deal back then.
It was, yeah, and he bred better than he was himself. He was a very good dog, but his pups were better than he was out of any bitch.
And is that what made him, in your eyes, such a great sire? Was the fact that he was breeding better than himself, or was it something else?
No, I think that if a dog can, and he was so dominant, you could put him to a real eye sticky sort of a bitch, or a real free running back and buck style bitch, and they'd come out as a genuine all rounder with enough field but still enough power. Ron Connolly at Omeo, I used him 2 or 3 times, and when I sold him, he abused me for selling him. He said he's the only 100% sire I've ever heard of. That was what he thought of him.
And what did he mean by 100% sire?
That every puppy bred was a worker and above average. Yeah. Yeah. Out of any bitch. Yeah.
And why did you go to Frank Scanlon back then, Bill?
I was up there looking at stock horses really throughout the area, and we were at Theo Hills, and Theo said, "Oh, you should go out and see old Frank Scanlon, because he's a great dog man and a great horseman." Frank Scanlon actually bred Cecil Bruce, that was the first horse registered in the Stock Horse Society. The stock horse people remember Frank as a great horseman, where the Kelpie people remember him as a great dog man.
There you go. I actually didn't. I've obviously heard of him for many years now in the Kelpie scene, but I didn't know he had horses.
We got to be very good friends with the Scanlon family, and we called in to see Frank one day, and he said, "Oh, I've got to show you this young mare I've just broken in." I think Frank was about 79 or something at the time. And I said, "Oh, why didn't you get one of the boys to do it for you, Frank?" "Oh, they wouldn't do it right." But at the time, Tom was coaching the Northern Territory Polocross team. And John was playing A-grade polo. They were pretty handy horsemen themselves. I'm sure they could have broken it in for him. But he said, I had to break it in to jump fences. He said, I'll just carry my coat and put that over the fence because this new place John's bought, that all the fences are down. I've got to be able to go where the sheep go. So I taught this mare to jump fences. So, here he was around 80 years of age. He'd just broken in a young horse to jump wire fences.
Was he still riding?
Oh, yeah, he rode. There is actually a little bit of Frank riding a horse working Swanee on one of Victor Hazlitt's tapes, CD that Victor put out. There's a bit of Frank riding when he was about 87 or something like that.
Oh, wow.
And it was a pretty smart horse they put him on. One point the sheep come back hard at the horse and the horse cut them like a cutting horse, and old Frank sat perfectly straight up. It didn't worry him at all.
That's unreal.
In those early 80s, mate, when you're making that transition from the collies to cobbies, you stopped competing in the trialling as well?
I did. Our children were getting to an age where they could compete in the horse world, and we could do that as a family. And if you talk to Michael now about 3 sheep trialling, he'll tell you that grass grows quicker. He can remember watching trials when he was a kid, and it was something that we could all do. Let's go with the horses. So I certainly kept my dogs, but we competed. And I always said I'll go back trialling when the kids leave home. Or I think it was probably 15 years after Crystal left home that I competed again at all, and I haven't done much since. So yeah, it was. It was just a family thing that we could do together to go with the horses, and not when you're milking cows, there's a limit to how much time you can get away from home to compete. You can't be dog trialing and playing with horses.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. And when did you stop milking cows, mate?
I stopped in 96, 97.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think I milked cows for 35 years after I left school, but I was milking them while I was at school too. So.
Do you still wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning?
About 5, yeah. Still wake up. That doesn't ever change. And the other interesting side of that is on the 40-degree days, at about 4:30 in the afternoon, if I've been having a bit of sitting in front of the computer or something because it's too hot, I'll get up and go outside and start doing some jobs.
Yeah.
No cooler. It's just as hot as 4:30, but yeah, the body's just ready. The body clock says, "Oh, it's time to get outside and milk the cows." So there's no cows. We'll do something else. Yeah.
And you mentioned Victor a bit earlier there. When you got back in after, like when your kids grown up a bit, you got a bit of Rihanna into your line there with your scallion stuff?
Yeah, I end up with a bitch called Rihanna Maggie. She was a very natural bitch, basically untrained. And so I've said to people, if a dog's always in the right place, why would you tell it to go somewhere else? And so how can you train them? So when she was 12-year-old, I put her in the 3 sheep trial in Benalla, and she won that. She actually won it by 30 points. Second was 30 points behind her. And she was used to carrying stock on the right-hand side of me because I worked her out of the ute a lot. So I'd drive up the left-hand flank and she'd work the other side or behind them or the lead if she had to. She'd do 270 degrees while I did 90. And it was the same when I took her out on the 3 sheep ground. She carried them along on the right-hand side, and then when we got near an obstacle, I just had to try and call her off the sheep to let them drift through so she didn't bring them between me and the obstacle. But she was a good bitch. She didn't breed on as well as she might have, but she was a very good bitch herself.
Have you had any other good dogs along the way that are pretty memorable to you?
Dog I bred called Clancy. He was probably the main dog I had while we had the sheep farm. He was a pretty special dog. He could do any job there was to do. He's like I was running 2,500 ewes, a couple of thousand wethers, and 200 or 300 dairy heifers on agistment, and he did 90% of the work. I only worked other dogs to try and educate some young dogs, so he could have done a lot on his own. He's a pretty special dog. So, yeah, he's probably the best Kelpie I've had as far as an all-round dog goes.
And mentioning that, and like you've seen a few dogs there over the years and been exposed to different varieties from different studs. Has what you liked in a dog changed over that time as well?
I think it does change. And that was something that we noticed back when I was 3 sheep trialling, that Bob Ross's dogs were fairly soft and fairly easy to talk to. And some of that's got to do with when you get to this sort of age, it's pretty hard to catch a young pup if it doesn't want to be caught, and you don't want to be working hard or, ordering a young dog around all the time. You want the dog to be able to do it by itself. You probably also handle stock a bit calmer and quieter the older you get also. But, low stress stock handling has been a big thing in the last 20 years. Well, 3 sheep trialling is low stress stock handling at its finest, and didn't have a name back then, but if you can handle 3 sheep around a 3 sheep course, you've mastered low stress stock handling. And Alroy Rob was pretty amazing. You could send him for the dairy cows and he'd walk them home at a very slow pace. You could send him for cows and calves, and if they didn't want to come home, they did come home, and they might be dripping blood both ends, but they did come home. It'd be very rare for him to bite a dairy cow because he didn't have to.
Yep.
And he ever saw him bite a sheep on the nose if it came at him. And he did a clever thing one day. I had to get some Angus heifers in on a hill property, and it was a very hot day, and I cast him out, and he went about 100 yards from me and stopped and started playing, run around in circles and carrying on, and I'm abusing him. But the heifers saw this weird looking dog playing in the grass. Thought, what the hell's going on there? So they all ran up 200 yards from where they were to see what it was. And then he slipped round behind them and brought them up to me. Why walk 300 yards if you can get them to come 200 of it?
I love it.
You can't teach dogs those sort of clever things like that. And there's some of the things you remember that they really are clever, how they can work things out for themselves.
Definitely.
Sure are, mate. Sure are. So, how about yourself? Like, what style of dog do you like? What do you like to keep around?
I try and breed paddock dogs that will work in the yard, where I think most people these days tend to be breeding yard dogs that they say will work in the paddock and don't really. The yard dog trials, I think, have pointed people in that direction. That it's most people are breeding dogs to compete in yard dog trials, and I think it's, they say they can work in the paddock, but you put on a utility trial and only half of them turn up. So that pretty well tells you that they're not paddock dogs at all.
Absolutely. So you're still aiming for that paddock dog with yard ability. So what? Obviously, like you've mentioned some great old lines there. What other lines did you infuse into your particular line prior to launching Stockmans?
Peter Griffiths and I work in together a fair bit with our dogs. I actually sold Peter his first Kelpie 33 or 4 years ago. And we've come to a mix that's about 50% old, what we term old blood, as Karawara or Rihanna, Glenville, or some of the Skirnland blood, some that old style paddock blood, with a bit of Karana and a bit of Go-Getter. The Go-Getter tends to put the trainability into the dogs, we've found.
Mhm.
And the Karana are all-round dogs anyway. They work in paddock and yard. That we find putting a bit more paddock into them and gets what we're looking for a bit more. Peter's, I helped him train his first one, but he's 10 times the trainer I am now because he's professionally training dogs, and I only train dogs I like. He has to train whatever's presented to him by his clients, and so he's had to devise methods of training a lot of different dogs that he or I wouldn't keep for ourselves, and that's made him a much better trainer.
Yeah, and was there a point where you went, well, that's it, let's get serious about the Kelpie, and when this is what we want to do, and what force of direction that you wanted to take?
I'm still looking for the same type of dog I was looking for in college. Still looking for that dog that was natural and had a good cast and stayed off their sheep naturally, but would come in and shift things when you wanted them to.
Yeah.
I don't see a lot of difference between what Clancy was able to do on when he was around and what Rob was able to do. They were fairly similar dogs in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
And I've got a young doggy now. Well, he's probably 4 or 5 now, but a dog called Burnus that he's perhaps a little bit too paddocky, but he will back and bark. There's no worries about that. He's got plenty of power inside. But yeah, pretty to watch outside, and that's still the type of dog I'm looking to breed.
And when you are breeding, where are you, like, what are you really looking for in lines, or is it like to like in like styles of dogs, or what do you look for before you put two dogs together?
No, I try to breed from an extreme sire usually. Frank Scanlon said you've got to breed from an extreme, and he likened it to breeding merino sheep, where the commercial wool grower would be horrified if he saw the rams that the stud was using to produce the rams that produce the wethers, because you lose some skin each time. And those rams that a lot of those studs are using have just got far too much skin on them to be you wouldn't keep them as wethers, but you need that to breed from, and it's a bit the same. Scanlon's Fred was an extreme. If you opened the gate in the cattle truck and there was no heads showing, you could call Fred and he'd go up, back the cattle in the truck and then eat his way out. He couldn't feel pain, didn't know what pain was. He'd get kicked and stomped and so on. And he was just an absolute powerhouse. But his pups were what people wanted. You lost some of that. Where if you'd bred, a lot of people go and breed from a champion dog and wonder why they don't get what they're looking for. I'd prefer to breed from what bred that champion dog. I'd breed from the sire of that dog that's the current champion, rather than go to the current champion.
Yep. And what happened there? Can you plug that back in, please? Sorry, mate. My battery just popped up then. Mate, are you still getting the same thrill out of seeing these paddock dogs you're breeding now as to when you first started? Like, do you still get that same feeling?
Yes, I do, and I enjoy seeing other people with my dogs, and I enjoy watching good dogs that other people breed. And I've attended, 8 or 9 of the National Kelpie trials. I've only competed in one of them, but I like to go and watch those top dogs working. It's as good a spectator sport as there is, I reckon, to see a really good utility trial.
And what is it about those paddock dogs, mate?
Oh, their ability to handle stock without to work on the edge of the flight zone and just put enough power to keep the stock moving without making them run.
And through those NKFs that you've attended and other trials, has there been like a standout dog over the years that has really tickled your fancy?
Probably Karana Sammy would be the best one I've seen. To me, she was more natural than Kevin's other dogs. She was easier to work, and I really enjoyed watching Sammy work. But there's a lot of good ones out there.
Absolutely, mate. And what about your current team of dogs there, Bill? Do you want to tell us a little bit about those?
I think there's three here that I bought from Peter Griffiths. Peter had a bitch called Glow, who was an outstanding brood bitch. Joe Spicer commented once on Facebook that she was the Kelpie world's best kept secret. And I've got one of her first pups, a dog called Tex. He's a fairly handy all-round dog. I've only trialled him once. He got a second. It's the only time he's been out. And I've got a grandson of Glow as Harris Farms Bonus that I've got as a grandson of Glow. Glow again was an extreme. She probably had a bit too much eye and a bit too afraid to break the bubble. Stock wouldn't get away from her, but she mightn't shift them as quick as she wanted either. She had plenty of back and bark inside, but outside she had beautiful cast and feel on her stock and so on. But yeah, she was a little bit too far in that direction, perhaps. But yeah, she bred on very well, because as you breed on, you lose a bit of their main quality. So, and I've got a Baroo bitch that is breeding very well. She's in that old style of the Karawara dogs, and she's breeding. Peter came and took two of her last litter because he broke in two of the previous litter for other people, and he was so impressed with them that he came and took two himself out of this litter. So yeah, she's breeding on very well to Bonus, and she's a fairly free moving Karawara style. She's not a real sticky bitch, and Bonus is tightening that up a bit and putting a bit more power in there.
Yeah. So you mentioned a few times, like, you go to a great sire. Do you then think that the bitch has got a certain pull over the litter, or do you think majority of it is that sire?
I think, generally speaking, the bitch tends to have more influence, but if you get a dominant sire, they are dominant.
Yeah.
And I've been lucky to have two. I've got one now. Bonus is incredibly dominant. Bred him to, I think, 3 red and tan bitches and a fawn bitch, as well as black and tan bitches, but every single pup is black and tan with a dark face, black eyes, and their work styles are very similar. They're not the same, obviously, but they are very similar. And Fred was a very dominant sire also. You could put them over different bitches and know that you're going to get something good out of it.
Yeah.
But generally speaking, the bitch does seem to have more influence.
And talking about influence, mate, is there a dog there that you've had in your camp that has been most influential to yourself or your line?
With the Kelpies, it's probably Clancy, but I can't afford to keep 30 or 40 dogs around me to keep different lines coming through, and that's partly why I work in with Peter so much. But it's hard to keep the lines coming through. You tend not to get a dog having generational influence.
Yeah. So what you were saying there before, we sort of jumped forward, but I'd like to jump back for a second. Those bitches, do they have to be like a criteria, or do you have something you like to see in them before you go and join them, or what is it that makes them okay to breed from, in your opinion?
They have to have some natural work for sure, but and I do place a fair bit on their pedigree. You know, this Baroo bitch that I have at the moment, she hasn't had a lot of opportunity to show how good she is. I could see her natural work, but she's not really broken in properly. But if you look back through her pedigree, then I know what she is, and as long as the bit of natural work I see, then I'm happy with that. It's some people are extremely good handlers, and they can make a dog look 10 times better than what it really is. Yep. And you might say, "Oh, I'll breed to that," or that bitch looks really good. I should get a pup out of it. When if its background's not there, if what you're seeing is man-made, then it's not going to breed on.
Can't breed training, right?
No, you can't breed training, and that's most of what people pay for these days is the training. If you want to sell a pet breed dog like a dachshund or a Labrador or something, you can get $3 or $4 grand. If you want to breed a proven working dog, you're lucky to get $1 grand for it as a pup. But people will pay 20 or 30 for the right dog if it's trained to a high enough level.
Absolutely. But you still got to have the breeding behind that dog to get the quality of training behind it, right? It's still got to have a good temperament, nature, ability.
It's got to have a bit of ability, and it's got to have some natural ability. All that has to be there.
Yeah.
But most of what people pay for at auctions is the training, and to get the training, then it has to have a pedigree to allow that. But some people can make a dog look a lot better than what other people can make it look. So you've got to be aware of that when you're breeding, not just go on current results. That doesn't really tell the full story.
And that'd be the same as buying at an auction. You'd have to take all that into consideration. Like, I know you've done quite well at a few auctions with some young dogs and all the rest, but to someone looking at purchasing, like, is that something you'd say they need to have a think about?
Yeah, I've actually only ever sold one at auction and got a stupid price for it. But
was that young pup you had?
It was a young pup. I sold 2 or 3. Yeah, and that has gone on. It's working cattle very well, that dog now, I know. So it mightn't have looked like a cattle dog to a lot of people, might have looked too soft, but it is a good, strong cattle dog now. So it has gone on and justified what they paid. But it amazes me that potential buyers don't ever ring up the vendors prior to the sale and ask them any questions. I've got a good mate, Matt Johnson in Tassie, that sells a lot of dogs at auctions, has done for years, held the record at Cassidy for a number of years. And I think he's, he might have sold 20 dogs or more at auctions. He's probably only ever had 1 or 2 phone calls prior to auction.
That just is so crazy to me, because isn't that who you're going to get your information from, isn't it? Like, if you're looking at buying, but
yeah,
and it's so familiar. There's so many people out there that are fairly successful for having strong names through the auctions and have never received a call.
Yeah, before or after.
Me as well.
Yeah, don't ring you up after either. So
yeah.
The auction world's an interesting one.
What speaking of auctions, what advice would you give to someone looking at purchasing a pup and thinking, oh well, let's explore the auction platform? What advice would you give to those potential purchasers?
Go and have a look at the mother and father of the pup and talk to the breeder. And if you're not happy with that, then don't consider it. If you haven't seen the parents working or know enough about the parents and know how it's bred, people are getting pups doing things way before they're ready for auctions. Selling pups at 5 or 6 months that are working like 18-month-old dogs.
Yeah.
And whether they go on or whether they blow up or whether they get hurt being so young and getting stomped in a race or jammed in a race somewhere. I'd hate to put a pup that age in a race. That's just too dangerous. The bones aren't set. But people are doing it and getting high prices for it.
And based off your reaction of what you said about the dog, the young dog you sent through, she sold well above your expectation?
Yeah, the pup I put up had no training. I had no handle on her at all. I worked her with a string on her so I could catch her at the end of the demo. People could see what was there naturally, and they had a blank canvas training-wise to work with. And that's how I'd sooner see. If I go to see someone's dog's working, I'd sooner them keep quiet and see what the dog does with completely no orders.
Yep.
I don't want to see it ordered around and so on. I want to see what the dog can do for itself.
And just off that particular result and exactly what you did there, and hats off to you for putting a dog in there like a blank canvas. Did people then contact you after, and has that helped you forward on more pups based on putting a dog out? Are you such a young dog out there with such natural ability?
Yeah, I think I have sold a few pups because of that sale. But yeah, pups are hard to sell at the moment.
But that must make you feel pretty good too, right? Based on putting a young dog out there, absolutely no training, all natural instinct, sells well, and then people contact you after. It gives you kind of reputation for having a quality line.
Yeah, that, and I enjoy seeing other people do well with my dogs, and whether it's working Brahman cattle in Queensland or wild merinos in Western New South or crossbreds in Victoria. I've got them working in all places, and they're actually the same type of dog everywhere. Because if a dog's natural enough, it'll work out what it has to do with whatever the stock are.
And did that ever surprise you, like coming from a dairy background and working cattle to then having dogs working Brahman cattle up north? Did that ever surprise you that your dogs were put in that particular environment, or you're always confident that they would perform?
I think in the right hands, people that are handling their cattle in the right way up north, and I've got a couple of dogs up there that I know they're using low stress stock handling for want of a better term. So if the cattle are handled correctly, then they only have to be steered. I've had numerous phone calls over the years for dogs, mad hanging dogs. And I don't breed mad hanging dogs, and I don't think anybody should. I don't see any use for them anywhere. And the same as I don't see any use for dogs that heel. Like if an animal's pointed in the right direction, leave it alone. healing it when it's going in the right directions only going to stress it and teach it to kick. And when you get in the yards with it, you're in danger. And as Fudge McCain says, he probably broke in more weaner cattle than anybody else for years. Livestock are only doing one of three things: resting, walking, or losing weight. Once you get livestock out of a walk, they're losing weight.
Yep.
And what do we get paid for? Weight.
Weight, that's right.
So stock should never be out of a walk if you can avoid it. Dogs should work to that. That old Rihanna Meggie I had, she'd cast huge distance and she'd drop in 100 yards behind stock. But if they started running towards me, because they knew where they were going to be taken to anyway, she'd come round on the lead and slow them back to a walk and make them walk home. She wouldn't let them run home, and that was in her. That wasn't nothing that I did. You're trying to bring stock to you, and here's the dog between you and the stock. But she's actually just working in the lead, just holding them back to a walk. And dogs that can do that, they're the right type of dog, in my opinion.
Have you seen that trait in your line since her?
Bonus does it to a certain extent. He'll come round and steady the lead. But Meg didn't breed on as well as I would have liked, so I haven't seen it from her progeny. The one litter she had was very good. I had a dog called King who I left him loose here one day because we were supposed to be going back to the other property to do some work, and he went down to the orchard and picked up 23 rams and brought them up. It was quite a zigzag sort of a route to get through gates that were open, past all the other dogs that would have slowed them down a fair bit, and down to the house and put them all on the front porch. And I look out the window and there's 23 rams sitting on the front porch. He's lying down 10 yards away, and you could tell that the rams hadn't been out of a walk and he hadn't been out of a walk. They'd come 300 yards up a fairly steep hill around a few corners and put them all on the porch for me because he knew I was inside. He couldn't get it. He couldn't open the door and bring them right into the lounge. But he was a fairly clever dog. I know one time when he was young, about 6 or 7 months, a couple of lambs broke up along a fence that bring sheep through a gate, and he just backed up in the paddock 50 metres and sat down and waited for the lambs to come back and find their gate themselves, where most dogs would have tried to head them and split two into 3 groups if they could have, and had created more havoc. But as a pup, he was smart enough just to get right back out of the way and let things come back together themselves. So that was probably the best one that Maggie bred, but he was very bored here with no work to do, so I sold him.
And talking about smart dogs like that, has it been around a dog that you've seen in your travels and like, shit, would have loved to own that dog? Well, Sammy was one. Yep.
Evans, she certainly impressed me as a bitch. But No, I mean, there's a lot of good dogs out there, and there's no perfect dog out there. I've yet to see the perfect dog.
I don't think there's many unicorns around, mate.
No. No.
And while we're talking about breeding, mate, do you breed many pups yourself?
Oh, we'll probably only breed 1 litter this year. We were breeding 3 or 4 litters a year. I get pleasure out of breeding and seeing what those pups develop into in other people's hands. And I haven't got any work for them here. I run about 100 ewes, so I need to handle them about 4 times a year at the most. So that's 4 hours work for the year. As far as necessary work goes, everything else I have to make. Some people are happy to go out near enough every day and work young dogs because that's their only interest, and that I have a lot of other interests that occupy my time. So I don't. It's not that I can't, but I don't spend enough time with my young dogs, and just haven't got the work for them.
Mm-hmm.
So having limited access and a lot of other hobbies, how do you go about starting?
Sorry, Dan.
No, you're right, mate. I was just saying, having limited access to stock and like other interests away from your dogs as well. Like, how do you go about starting a young dog? Like, is there a particular age you start them or a particular setup?
Well, I don't like round yards for a start. Round yards don't do much for me at all. They're too small. A dog can't get on the edge of the flight zone. If you're on the fence yourself and you want your dog to cover, it's not covering 180 degrees. It's only covering about 100 degrees.
Yeah.
John Geddes used to work his pups on a corner where they had to cover 270 degrees. He had a paddock sticking into a paddock, if you like, so he had a fence, and he could stand on the corner, and a young dog would have to cover 270 degrees. But I like a rectangular yard, so you can work a dog along a fence if you have to, but mostly I like to be able to work in the middle and have, my yard's only just big enough, but something about tennis court size at least, so that a dog can get outside the flight zone. You train a sheep, the flight zone might only be 3 or 4 meters sometimes. So the dog can get outside it, but and I'll show them sheep when they're 3 months old. Most of them want to go then. Some don't, but most of them will go at around that age. And they might see sheep once a week or once a fortnight for a few months. And quite often I'll send them to Peter for a month just to get a bit more handle on them, and then go on from there, which is a time thing more than anything else. It's not that I can't do it. It's just sometimes it's easier to send them over to Peter and let me keep doing what I am doing.
Yeah.
Sorry, you go, Laura.
I was just going to say, there's been a question come in here from Mick Goodman. He's asked, "Hi Bill, would you make much fuss of a 9-month pup coming in too hard on sheep?"
Um, yeah, some pups you'll have to help find the flight zone, but I don't like them coming in too hard. Yeah. If you can't hold it off easily, then that wouldn't suit me.
Yeah.
It does have to come in enough to shift sheep or shift whatever it has to shift, but it also needs to know you don't want to pushing sheep past you. It only needs to bring sheep to you, and you need to be able to keep it out on the edge of the flight zone. And if getting it back on the edge of the flight zone is too hard, then it'd find somewhere else. It wouldn't stay with me.
Yeah, that's fair.
And that's where that more of that natural paddock dog comes in for yourself rather than that pushy yard type.
Yeah.
And you mentioned there just before how like you don't mind sending a young dog to Peter. Do you get satisfaction off watching Pete work with young dogs you've bred and seeing where he can take them and the potential in them?
Yeah, I do. Quite a number of pups that I've bred and sold to other people go through Peter's hands. Some of them, when they get the pup at 8 weeks from me, they'll book them in then with Peter. Peter's usually booked up for 8 or 9 months at least.
Yeah.
And they'll book them in then and take them to Peter when they're between 8 and 12 months and get a handle on them. I get pleasure out of watching my dogs in other people's hands, and there's a few trialling out there that are doing well, and a lot in general work that people are very happy with, and I get a kick out of that.
And for people out there that aren't familiar with Peter, it's Peter Griffiths, who we have spoken with before. I think maybe last year we spoke with Pete.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, I think it was last year now.
Yeah. And like off the back, like obviously you really respect Pete's influence or opinion. How much influence does he have on, when he works with a young dog that you've bred? How much influence does he have on what you're breeding going forwards? Like you sit down and have a chat and go, this is what I found on this particular litter. How about we look at something else here? Or that's really good. Let's keep running down this path. Or how much influence do you guys, you sit down over a cup of tea or a beer and have a chat about that stuff?
Yeah, we do. And that, he always talked to me about what he was going to join Glow to next time. And he suggested different breedings amongst my dogs, and we do talk about it, and that helps both of us, I think.
Mm-hmm. Particularly if you're breeding dogs and he's training them for clients, well, that's a bit of a combo you got going there, right?
Yeah. Some people are taking their dogs back at least a second time, sometimes a third time.
Yep.
And they buy a pup for $1,000 and they might spend another $2,000 or $3,000 on it on training.
Yep.
I owes them $4,000. They've got a dog worth 10 to 15.
Yeah.
It's not rocket science. So, and there's a lot of people out there that can't break in a dog or haven't got the time or inclination.
Or the experience.
Yeah, and a lot of them aren't very good handlers, even with a trained dog. But if they send a dog to Peter for a month, and then Peter tells them what to do with the dog at that stage, and then it comes back, say, 2 or 3 months later for another month, and then Peter has another input into their handling of the dog, that's improving those handlers' ability quite a bit, and that's got to be good for the dogs and the livestock. The more we can help people work livestock and dogs the correct way, the better it has to be for everyone.
Yeah, definitely.
Absolutely, mate. And being around the dog industry for quite a substantial time now, mate, what advice would you give to someone looking to purchase their first pup or dog?
Go and talk to the breeder and look at the parents of the pups, and by talking to the breeder, you should work out whether you feel they're genuine and whether you feel what the parents do. Are they the type of dog that you want? Some people still want a mad yard type dog that doesn't know where the edge of the flight zone is, because there might be a truckie. A dog's never going to be outside the flight zone in its life anyway. So they don't need the type of dog that I'm breeding. That they do need a different type of dog. So there's no point coming to me. I'll tell them, no, I don't breed that type of dog. There's plenty of people that do. Go and talk to someone else that breeds those full-on yard truck type dogs.
No, I think that's very honest and good on you for being honest like that to clients, because at the end of the day, they're not going to be happy if you're selling them a yard dog and that's not what you're breeding. So
no, and I know I've exported 3 or 4 dogs, but I don't like exporting because you can't service your client.
Mm-hmm.
And if I sell a dog to someone here and it's too full on for their touchy merino sheep out west, then we can do something about it. But if I sell a dog to someone in Germany and it's not strong enough for their heavy meat sheep that are shedded half the time, then I can't do anything about that.
Yeah.
So yeah, and that girl in France, I bought a couple from me, and she was very happy with them, and they've bred on well for her. And that we went over and saw the dogs. They actually met us at the airport with the dog.
Oh, that's awesome.
So that's nice, but I've had opportunity to export a lot of others, and I've said no, I haven't got the right type of dog for you at the moment, and so I can't help you. And,
those ones that you have exported and they've been successful, have you found that they've also had lines of other dogs in Australia? And have those dogs been kind of like a parallel to what you're breeding?
Some of the dogs I saw in Europe were too soft for the type of sheep they've got there.
Yep.
If your dogs are only capable of handling Western Merinos, then they're not the type of dog to send to Europe. Their sheep are, well, I guess our composites and white Suffolk type sheep here are similar. You need a bit more dog to handle them. Generally, you don't need a big casting dog in Europe. Their paddocks are mostly fairly small.
Yep.
This girl in France was actually a dairy farmer. They've stopped milking now, but her dogs used to wake the cows up in the barn and bring them down 5 at a time for a 5-a-side herringbone shed.
Yeah.
And they worked inside in the shed all the time, but she did also sheepdog trial them with their trials over there. She had a very good dog from Norway. I can't think of his name. His first name's Odd. Yeah, one of the strongest walk-up dogs I've seen. Good steady walk-up. She'd actually never worked him in the paddock on cattle, and when we were there, I worked him on cattle on some 2-year-old heifers, and he'd walk straight up to anything, but very calm and steady. He was a good dog. And he bred well with the first bitch that I sent over there.
No,
Yeah.
beautiful.
And you have touched on utility trialing there a little bit tonight. Do you plan on getting to any upcoming utility trials?
Sorry about that.
It's all right.
You're all right.
Yeah, I probably will do a few more. It's hard to get enough work into your dogs to take them to a trial when you haven't got any work.
Yep. Laura and I can both relate to that, mate.
And I know there's a lot in that position. There's a lot of people with no stock at all that are trialing. But yeah, it's something I probably will do a few more. On Kevin's 81 and he's still out there winning the national, so I guess I've got a few years left. I'm 5 or 6 years behind him. So.
Probably in Victoria, you probably run a few more utility trials than what we do probably up here in New South and even more in Queensland. Why do you think you guys probably down south run a few more utility type trials than say the Yardie and 3 Sheep?
There's a lot of 3 Sheep trials down here.
Yeah, and that's what I mean. Like, there's still a heap of 3 Sheep up here in Queensland, but just in Victoria, like we seem to see more utility trials advertised. Is it something that is actively pushed more, or they've just always been around? There's always been more around.
It might have something to do with Rod Kevelbone, president. He likes utility trials. Yeah, and just I don't know how many there is in Victoria. There's probably only 4 or 5. It's not a lot.
Yep.
Would
you like to see more on the calendar?
When there's a yard trial, sometimes 3 on a weekend, so there's still big percentage of yard trial. Like 90% of the trials will be yard trials. And yeah, I think it depends on the personnel in the committee really at the time, whether they push yard trials or utility trials. And there's probably been a lot of people that have been happy to, and competitors, you can get 300 runs in a yard trial easily in Victoria, and you might get 80 runs in a utility trial. So and you have to have a venue that's suitable and sheep for a utility trial. So yeah. They are harder to run.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Is there anyone you'd like to see us sit down with on Dog Talk and have a chat?
Well, Matt Johnson from Tassie. I think Matt was I think he won the yard trial championship 12 years in a row in Tassie. He doesn't trial these days, or very little. And he sold a dog at Casterton years ago for 12,000 that held for, I think, 5 or 6 years. He also topped the sale the following year from that with a dog at 10,000. Recent auctions he sold dogs up to 27,000. And he runs a lot of schools. I don't know how many schools he runs a year in Tassie, but a lot of them, and does demonstrations at field days and things. So we got him to come over and run a school here in the northeast a couple of months ago. We got 30 people along to it. So he and I and another young fella together handled the numbers. We split them up into groups, Matt's been around dogs a long time, bred some very good ones, and worked dogs at a high level.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you.
Very, very cool, mate. And being in the dairy industry for so long, mate, what advice would you give to someone that wanted to get involved in the livestock industry and didn't know where to start?
Just find a farmer close to you and go and work alongside them. See if it's really what you want to do before you start looking to it as a career. There's plenty of people out there that'd be happy to show you the ropes and so on. And if it is a career for you, then farms are making huge amount of money these days. It seems an impossible task to buy a farm, but you can start at the bottom. You can start working for wages and then share farming. Dairying's probably the easiest one with a ladder to climb, but the other livestock industries also have ladders that you can start off as a jackaroo and work your way up to a management position, and opportunities come along that you might be able to get your own property. The first property we bought, we actually borrowed more than 100% of the money for the property. We had our own herd of cows, but we borrowed over 100%.
Wow. That's putting them on the line.
It was a case of, we've got the milk and water, you bring the tea and sugar.
I love it.
But once you get your name on a bit of paper, then it takes a lot to rub it off if you're fair dinkum.
Yep. Definitely.
Absolutely. Where were we there, Laura? I answered that. The couple of questions come in after we already had spoken about particular things tonight. So sorry, guys, I stole your questions there. So we're going to make that very easy for you for tonight, Bill. But we're still not going to let you go that easy because Laura just wouldn't do that to you.
One last question, as always. Would you rather fight one duck the size of a horse or 20 horses the size of ducks?
I don't think I've got a pot big enough for a duck the size of a horse. and there all seems to be a market for miniature horses. So maybe we'll go with the miniature horses.
I love it. That's a good one.
Put some thought into that, mate. That's fantastic. Mate, thank you very much for your time tonight. We really appreciate it. And to all our guests that logged on and everyone listening back, we really appreciate you supporting the show. And Bill, thank you very much for your time, mate.
Thank you.
And to everyone listening, please remember we learn every day, and the day we stop learning will be a sad one for all of us.
That's right. Yeah, there's a good saying. If you want to find everything that there is to know about horses or dogs, for that matter, go and ask an 18-year-old kid. If you want to learn a little bit, go and ask an 80-year-old man.
Oh, I love it. That's gold.
On that note, have a great night.
Thank you.
Good night.
Thank you. Cheers.
Bye.